Welcome to the Blockbusters and Birdwalks podcast. I am the curator, Garrett Chaffin-Kirai. As written about and taught in the United States, the history of post-World War II movies often follows this pattern: Italian neorealism and responses to neorealism, the impact of TV, Hollywood spectacle, the French New Wave and responses to the New Wave, Cold War movies, social realism, movies from Sweden, Japan, and China, Hollywood's second golden age, New German cinema, Third World cinema, Hong Kong, Bollywood, Australia, and New Zealand, the rise of the blockbuster, the impact of home video, corporate synergy versus independent production, CGI, international co-production, the impact of the internet, and streaming. We might add to this movie-centric list other sociocultural experiences, including civil rights agitation, anti-colonial independence movements, gender and sexuality-based advocacy, various wars, several epidemics, and more than a handful of economic crises. Then, we might sprinkle in some famous and influential people, both inside and outside the arts, like Kennedy, Gandhi, Kubrick, Warhol, Lucas, Thatcher, Reagan, Beyoncé. Finally, we drill into specific movie titles and themes we're interested in exploring. In this idiosyncratic history of post-World War II movies, we continue with Terminator 2, Judgment Day, and Innovation. Beginning in 1989, I began my public working life by taking a job at the local movie theater. By the summer of 1991, after many months of anticipating the release of Terminator 2 Judgment Day, the staff at our biggest local movie theater assembled one morning, the day before the official release on July 3, 1991, and our projectionist, a good friend, assembled the movie for a staff screening. We hooted, we hollered, we felt we were in the know and ahead of the curve of what North America was soon to know, that the latest Arnold Schwarzenegger action-adventure vehicle, Terminator 2 Judgment Day, was and is terrific fun. The story takes up some years after the original The Terminator from 1984, in which a future AI that has taken over the world and is set upon exterminating all of humankind sends back in time a robot killing machine, the Terminator, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, to hunt down a woman named Sarah Connor, played by Linda Hamilton, who will eventually give birth to the one human savior capable of fighting back against the AI, which is called Skynet. The first Terminator movie ends with the defeat of the machine. The Terminator is crushed, Sarah Connor is impregnated with that eventual savior of the future, and she goes off into the sunset of the Sonoran Desert trying to figure out a way to survive until eventual Judgment Day. Well, here we are. In the sequel, Skynet is again sending back in time another machine, a Terminator, this time called the T-1000, to kill not Sarah Connor, but her son, John Connor, played by Edward Furlong, who is a preteen boy in Los Angeles. His mother, Sarah, has been incarcerated because of psychiatric difficulties. Nobody seems to believe her story of a machine from the future coming back in time to murder her, and so she's been institutionalized for all of John's life. He resents her terribly, but the fact is he has certain survival skills. Unexpectedly, John Connor of the future, the adult, has sent back in time a protector Terminator that he has reprogrammed to ensure that his younger self will mature and become the elder self that saves himself in this massive time loop. I've already over-explained the issue, but here's the point. The Terminator uncaps that really interesting problem of what time travel means. How it is that something from the future can change the past, and if that's the case, was that always the design of the system? We now consider various possible tracks in the multiverse. This has become important to a lot of modern pop culture, but if we wind the clock back, set ourselves in the seat that I occupied on July 2nd, 1991, one day before the rest of America got to see Terminator 2 Judgment Day, what we've got is the combination of then extraordinarily envelope-popping special effects, especially computer-generated imagery, along with extremely good sound design and this twitchy philosophical problem of how time travel works, which is largely ironed out in the movie because the robot from the future that adult John Connor has sent back is again played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Terminator. Skynet's improved Terminator robot, the T-1000, played by Robert Patrick, largely spends his time on screen in the sequel dressed as a police officer, and from that point the movie unspools as the Terminator, back in time in roughly 1996-1997, is trying to find John Connor, who wants to find his mother. All three of them want to be saved and preserve themselves from the T-1000, which is a merciless killing machine. And here's the catch. We are used to the Schwarzeneggerian Terminator, an overlarge, man-built thing, heavily muscled with a supremely tough skeleton of metal. The T-1000 that's chasing him, though, is an alloy of liquid metal that can take shape at will, the will of this robot, to anything it wants and comes in contact with that is organic. So, if it shakes hands with a person, it can instantly recombine itself to take over that person's shape, and generally that means the T-1000 kills its prey to become the prey in order to get one step closer to John Connor. Along the way, we realized that there was a leftover piece of machinery from the original Terminator in the original movie from 1984. And this small bit of technology has pointed the way for a robotics engineer named Miles Dyson, that's Joe Morton, who's working with this cutting-edge technology to light the pathway into a brighter future that will eventually give rise to Skynet. Sarah eventually determines that she should dispatch Dyson because that could shut down Skynet's development and save the world from nuclear Armageddon when the machines strike back and destroy all of humankind except for a sliver of a workforce that John Connor will eventually rally to the cause of preserving human life. Again, too much exposition from this guy, Garrett. What I want to emphasize most of all is the great enthusiasm I have for this movie that is unwaning through the years because it is the combination of really visceral entertainment and stunt work and technology that, though we've seen it improve in the 30 years since it debuted, remains pretty startling. Let's pause for a second and pull back to realize that movies have always developed because engineers work to present the intersection of dramatic art forms and photography, which often overlaps with musical performance, with oratory, but there is an engineering component. How can we trick the eye and ear into believing what we project onto a frame, onto a screen in front of a crowd of people, and cause that crowd of people to get the feels? Very often this trickery involves things like stunt work, which suggests people are in extreme danger. It may involve camera tricks. It may involve forced perspective. It may involve miniatures. It may involve violent actions. It may involve lots of post-production sound to suggest things have happened, although they actually haven't. And of course, it also suggests raw special effects, which James Cameron, working through his production company with his own digital effects studio that he funded, was able to create a brand new way of imagining how movie stories could be told. The peculiar trickery that T2 rests upon was earlier pioneered by Jim Cameron in his movie The Abyss from 1989. In that earlier movie, there is a manipulative intelligence that takes the shape of water that can twist and turn and reflect whatever it might meet. Ultimately, this is a benevolent force, and people were awed by it. That technology sat in the background of the toolbox that Jim Cameron dips into quite heavily for this newer movie, making Robert Patrick's T-1000 a truly intimidating creature. Why? Taking liquid form, this monster can literally go through the grates of a jail. It can turn a finger into a spike and impale an object. One of the interesting things that you notice when you look at the movie closely is that Schwarzenegger, as designed, as the Terminator, is supposed to be an infiltrator killer. That is, it's to look like a person. It's supposed to have bad breath. It's supposed to respire and sweat. The thing about the T-1000, though, it is different. and it's lit usually in blue light. Robert Patrick has a much smaller, sleeker, leaner body than Schwarzenegger, who's known to be the former Mr. Olympia of extraordinary musculature. On top of that, Robert Patrick speaks in extremely even tones, and he has a bare minimum of dialogue in the movie. And most importantly, Robert Patrick's Terminator never sweats. When we contrast these two images, a huge, burly, muscled, leather-clad guy called Schwarzenegger who wears sunglasses and is increasingly bruised, damaged, and mangled as the movie moves along, we contrast that with Robert Patrick, who spends most of the movie dressed as a police officer, who absorbs no damage really whatsoever in a long-lasting way because the liquid metal that he is composed of can always recompose around a temporary injury. In the end, and accidentally enough, because of the way the story is designed, a final highway chase delivers our trio into a smelting works where they're ultimately able to melt down, dispatch, and kill the T-1000, and also kill Arnold's Terminator 2. That ends the overall movie. However, there is a note of leftover. Just as the original Terminator left behind part of its microchipped brain, which Dyson eventually finds and tries to use to develop the AI that would become Skynet and obliterate the world, Arnold in Terminator 2 Judgment Day leaves behind his arm, which gets trapped in a piece of machinery while he's trying to protect John and Sarah from the T-1000. Presumably that will be found by some future entrepreneur, and there will be sequel after sequel. And of course, now that we're far into the future, more than 30 years from T2, nearly 40 years from the original Terminator, we know that there have been multiple sequels and even a spin-off TV series. As I reflect on the Terminator when watching it all of these years later, because I watched it serially that summer of 1991, and then I bought a copy on videotape, and I bought a copy on Laserdisc, and I hosted viewing parties for a period of years until I got distracted by adult responsibilities in the later 1990s. Having returned to watch this movie again, I can report that it plays slipshod with the timeline of the original Terminator. That's forgivable because, after all, this is popcorn summer entertainment. But I do want to emphasize the absolutely extraordinary measure of impact this movie had then. It was not possible to walk the shores of an American city in the summer of 1991 and not be intensely aware that T2 was either about to arrive or had just shown up. It was budgeted at somewhere around $100 to $102 million, which was, I think, close to a record in the early 1990s. And from that investment earned $500 million in global box office returns through ticket sales before the aftermarket and sell-through on home video, which was also a boon to these filmmakers. A different way to unspool this is to say, this movie opened huge and extremely wide for the times of the early 1990s. In North America, that meant more than 2,200 screens, which have been more than doubled by movies in the 21st century, but then was considered groundbreaking. Money was piled into this movie, not only to pay for the mainline talent of Schwarzenegger and Linda Hamilton reprising her earlier role, but all of that money spent on all of those special effects so that nary a scene unspools before us without something thrilling to see. And it employs really great sound technicians, the likes of Tom Johnson, Gary Rydstrom, Gary Summers, and Lee Orloff, all of whom won an Academy Award for Best Sound, and then Rydstrom, along with Gloria Borders, won another Academy Award for Sound Effects Editing. Indeed, this movie really is an assault on the ears in the most pleasant possible way because it sounds so great. An additional little barb of interest, at least to this guy, is to note that this movie was also very good about figuring out ways to tie in other media as an aspect of its promotion. In particular, I was involved in being a huge fan of Guns N' Roses from Appetite for Destruction in 1986, and they show up on the soundtrack. Is something that John Connor plays on his boombox while riding across town on his motorcycle, stealing money from ATMs, playing at the video arcade, and otherwise being a ne'er-do-well juvenile delinquent, which is exactly what's necessary to turn him into the adult who can train humanity to fight back against the AI called Skynet.
Watching John with the machine, It was suddenly so clear. The Terminator would never stop. It would never leave him. And it would never hurt him, never shout at him or get drunk and hit him or say it was too busy to spend time with him. It would always be there, and it would die to protect him. Of all the would-be fathers who came and went over the years, this thing, this machine, was the only one who measured up.
Of course, there are certain key things about this movie that most people recognize. One, Schwarzenegger spends a lot of his time on top of a motorcycle trying to find John Connor, doing exquisite stunts. This happens all through Los Angeles, and with the larger budget T2 has, it wasn't restricted to nighttime shooting like the original Terminator. They are downtown in really exciting places. We also have to notice that there is a fashion stamp placed upon this movie. The sunglasses worn by Linda Hamilton and Schwarzenegger flew off the shelves in the season afterwards, and gym memberships went up. Everybody seemed to be turned on by Linda Hamilton's transformation from a relatively pretty, relatively soft-looking person into a hard-bodied athlete. A final note. Like many important movies by many important filmmakers, the first draft that's shared with the public in commercial movie theaters is not always the preferred version. Terminator 2 has a director's cut, which extends certain scenes, adds sequences that were plucked out, that were inefficient for making sure it has a lean runtime, in this case, of just over 2 hours and 10 minutes. The extended edition offers increased throwbacks to the original movie, more expansion into how Skynet works, more discovery of how it is Sarah Connor learns to trust the Terminator that had once tried to kill her. I appreciate the efficiency of the theatrical cut, but I also like the digressive passages of the director's cut. It's up to you what you prefer to watch, but both ought to be placed in somebody's back pocket as a symptom of early 1990s spectacle, innovation, excitement, and the Schwarzenegger movie star machine.
Stay here. I'll be back.
Thank you for listening to the Blockbusters and Birdwalks podcast. My name is Garrett Chaffin Kirai. Boop boopity doo.